Hello there, healthcare humans. Thank you so much for coming back for another episode of The Other Human in the Room. So, welcome to part 3 of 3 in my series on my year-ish in review. So, as I said before, it's been approximately 1 year since I started releasing podcasts on a pretty weekly basis. And I thought for myself to have this sort of timestamp, but also I imagine this could be of interest to others. I wanted to share some of my experiences that I've had over the past year and like what I've learned from them in different domains. So the first podcast was all about my personal life. The second podcast was the clinical work part of my personal life, because it's all your personal life, right? And now this last one is about this newest aspect of my life that I've created for myself this past year, which was opening a restorative medical education and coaching business. So this is very kind of meta and behind the scenes of this podcast and everything else that I offer beyond this podcast. And I hope this is interesting. I think I really love behind the scenes. Like back when we had DVDs, you guys remember DVDs and Blu-rays and stuff? I was the one, I would watch all the extras. I would listen to all the different commentaries. I got the special extended edition of the Lord of the Rings movies. And like the movies themselves, they're not that great, but I loved all the behind the scenes footage of New Zealand and the making all the stuff for the movie. I love knowing how things are made. So this podcast is for me and anyone else like me who likes behind the scenes. Okay. So what have I experienced over this past year, so like in terms of what I experienced personally, like what gave me some of the tools that I've used to offer you all my insights and, workshops and that sort of thing, is I completed 3 separate certifications in coaching, which, I enjoyed and got a lot from all of them, but I think objectively we can all agree that's too many to do in a year span. And also invested a significant amount of money to do them, by the way, which is its own little story that I might circle back to at some point in this podcast. But having said that, I am so grateful for everything that those different spaces and certifications taught me about my mind, about what's possible for me in the world, about social justice and equity work, because one of them was dedicated specifically to that. And it was through, people who have been in those certifications teaching me that my life can be more than what I was expecting. I don't have to get stuck in burnout. The things that I think are constants in my life and that I'm trapped by, I can get myself untrapped. If you want to say what's like a general thesis of what coaching can do for a person, it's like whatever you think you're trapped in, coaching helps you see how to get untrapped and to find a way forward that feels more like you, that feels more like what you want to do with your life, right? And all of these, they are called coaching, but like one of them is literally called the Life Coach School. Like it's interesting, this whole like life coaching and coaching realm. And I definitely want to talk more about that a bit later in the podcast. But what I want to say in terms of what it helped nourish me and build me up is just like everything I just talked about in the last 2 episodes, the stuff that I've experienced in my personal life this last year, and the way I was able to manage and navigate through really painful things like my husband's like cancer diagnosis and treatment, in the clinical work. I mean, hello, have you met healthcare recently? It's objectively rough out there. Patients weren't calmer, but I enjoyed their presence more. And both of those realms were possible because of what I have learned and applied from coaching. So I will always love everything I've learned from this space because of literally how it's transformed my home life and my work life forever, and it's done it so much that ergo I want to do it for other people, like, which is sort of the natural progression of things for a lot of people, not everyone. The thing I have really learned about myself is, especially this past year, is how much I love teaching. And I think that's like the core. When I invented the term restorative medical education and restorative coaching, I just sort of invented it. there was times where people are like, well, why don't you just call yourself a coach? Like, why do you want to say medical, like the education part too? But I actually do think like the main theme and ribbon that runs through everything I do is actually education, teaching, by which I mean showing people an alternative story and bringing more details and richness and widening what they think is possible for themselves, widening and expanding and flipping on its head what we think is true about the world, which is teaching. That is what teaching is. You think you don't know that multiplication exists, so someone tells you this is what's possible to do with numbers, you know? And I think that's the thing I've discovered I am good at. I say with only a tremble of anxiety about being self-aggrandizing. I do think I am good at it, and I want to continue to get better at it. And part of why I'm good at it and want to get better at it is I enjoy it so, so deeply. I enjoy it with my medical learners, like in my faculty position. I enjoy it with my patients, but I also so deeply enjoy it with all of you who listen to this podcast and follow on social media and are my clients or whatever. Like, a deep part of what I do will always be teaching. And I think the best kind of teaching will always incorporating a lot of coaching, because the difference is that coaching is hearing where the patient, or the person I should say, is at, hearing and understanding how their unique mind works and their unique barriers and hiccups of like what's happening to them in their brain, and customizing what you teach them, customizing what you offer to them based on what you see in terms of how they're viewing their life or they're viewing a certain problem. That's the coaching part, and including a lot of questions and saying, hey, I've shown you this possibility, but what lands with you? What possibilities can you generate from your brain? Because you have your own best solutions, you know? And that's the best, richest kind of teaching, is the one that knows you are co-creating the learning with the other person, you know? So that's like the experience I've had doing this work this past year, as well as a lot of like, anxiety, performance anxiety a little bit, but a lot of like thrills, like the high that comes with like talking to a small or large group of people about something you care about and having it received well has been like, I think I'm chasing that high forever, folks. That's what's gotten me here. There's not like to put yourself in a position to be seen and heard for something you love talking about and that means so much to you and is sort of your truth you need to share, and having others receive it and actually having it change their lives is like, holy cannoli, could do this forever. So I know that I'm here for the long term. I don't know exactly what long term means, but I'm not shutting this podcast down anytime soon. Even if everyone stops listening, I think I would still keep going, because honestly, before I started this podcast, I used to just like think all these thoughts in my head. You should like look at my journals from like, ever since I started practicing medicine. I have whole journals that are like trying to deconstruct, like, what are we doing here in medicine? Why is no one talking about these things? And I have done different kinds of projects or support groups where I got to like give a lot of that energy. But the notion of this being this creative way through this podcast and the other things that I do is just so yummy. And so I found this new passion that totally nourishes me in a way that then feeds and fuels my energy to iterate with my patients, and has absolutely supported me and fueled me in times where in my home life, things were hard, in a way where it's not that it was an escape, but it was like, it gave me a sense of perspective and purpose beyond. Actually, it was interesting. Like, I kept doing the podcast. I kept taking on new clients and having client sessions all through my husband having cancer in the spring. And one of the things I saw that like the socialized inhuman story that kept coming up is like, you can't do that. Like a cancer wife, like my brain would be like, but a cancer wife can't enjoy herself. A cancer wife can't have other pursuits. You should be only like wringing your hands and like hovering over your husband, which if you've met my husband would go very poorly. But even if that's what he wanted, say he was like, why aren't you over here wringing your hands and hovering? Like say he was that kind of, say that was how he was reacting to the cancer he was having. I would like explain very clearly why if I was doing that, I would not be doing anyone I would be dying inside. It would not be good for him. It would not be good for me. Like actually continuing to seek and support my passion in doing though, helping other people also helped me help him from a much like clearer place where I wasn't like pouring too much of myself into him in a way that wasn't about him. It would be about me, you know, because I was pouring myself into what I knew was my like purpose, which is what I'm doing with this work and how that feeds into my clinical work. Then with him, I could just be clear and just say, what do you need? And then offer, if he asked me for something, offer it to him if it was available to me. Like it was so much clearer that way, you know? So that's how I know that this is like what I'm here for. This is why I was born, you know, is this stuff. And I think it was because I have that level of certainty and it's been reinforced so many times. I've had some like really beautiful, I guess you could say, success. Like I was reflecting back and counting, and I believe I have had 15 different one-on-one coaching clients over this past year, which is like, I can't believe I've interacted and held space in a container for that many people and walked people through, that many people have helped walk through their journey in healthcare. And I've heard consistently that it's been helpful to them. And if you're listening and you actually didn't find it helpful, please let me know. I want to improve and improve experiences for people. But I've heard so much about, and I've watched, you know, they'll come back to me and I'll say, what do you want to celebrate this week? And they'll say, I set this boundary with this patient, or I got my inbox done, or I shifted this dynamic with my coworker, or whatever it is. And like, I'm hearing it so consistently, and it like blows my mind every time. I'm like, oh my gosh, I get to be part of making this one human's life better. And in doing so, I am helping make healthcare better. Like that's like it sounds like this giant mission, but like, this is what I have to contribute to like saving healthcare. And I do think of it as like kind of as serious as that, honestly. And it's just such a source of joy and purpose for me. Oh my gosh. Through that, still like iterating, like with each new client, no one's issues are the same. And I'm not going to talk about any of your issues if you're a client, of course, confidentiality, but like everyone asked for my support about a different aspect of their journey, which is so interesting. And some of it ends up being more personal, as in like home life, and some of it ends up being colleagues, and some of it ends up being patients, and some of it ends up being time, and so many different things. And like they all feed into each other in the end. And so you see like this whole person and just supporting them. One recent thing I discovered over the last couple months is how much I love voice memo coaching. Like, because up until this point, I've been doing like, you know, Zoom calls, and then people can email me in between, which most people wouldn't. But the Zoom calls were so rich. But I've discovered an enhanced feature, which is I use mostly Slack, but you can also use any kind of messenger app that lets you send voice memos, like voice recordings, where you either they message something to me, and then I often will record a message back. So it ends up being like a little personalized podcast that's about their specific issue. I love it so much. I love hearing their voice memos when they send them. I feel like when I send them back, they get a much richer answer and piece of coaching from me than writing, because you hear the whole tone and everything. And I'm doing a lot with like even just peers and friends, a lot in the coaching space, where like basically you can have full on conversations asynchronously, people in different time zones. And I'm just loving it so much. So I just also wanted to say, strong recommend to start voice memoing people. I never knew that people did that. Maybe everyone out there already does that, but I never did that with like friends and stuff. And it's like so much more intimate and rich in terms of how you can communicate, especially when, you know, if you do live in different places, it's hard to like set aside an hour of time to talk. This way you can like constantly be talking when it suits you. It's on the way home, driving. You know, I love to talk and drive, all the podcasts I've recorded. So this is just another avenue, and I love it. So that's one big thing I wanted to kind of celebrate, is like the number and richness of who me showing up in the world doing what I wanted to do was then able to receive these 15 fabulous healthcare humans. And the number of people that I have been in contact with and have had an opportunity to support is much larger, of course, because like I've done things I never could have imagined myself doing. I've done like live, very large like Zoom talks, been on panels with like huge numbers of people. I've done my own very intimate workshops with people. I gave a talk at a conference where there's a huge room of people, and the difference of having something that I just feel like is in my bones to say and that I enjoy saying, and I'm saying in my style without thinking about if I'm saying it right or if it's professional enough or whatever, but it's just like who I am on a stage, like so fun. So if you asked me 2 years ago, it's like, oh, how do you think about public speaking? I'd be like, no, thank you. But apparently I enjoy it. And so the number of people I've had the opportunity to connect with and like hopefully help, some of them hopefully felt helped when I was giving some of this stuff to them. Social media, oh my gosh, would I ever have thought of myself as like being on social media or having a TikTok? Like, no, but you have to be careful because like some of these places, they're designed to help you get a high off of engagement. And so then you kind of get sucked into the numbers of who's liking you and sharing you. And I had to go on a journey of letting go some of that. Because really what I've come to is it's just yet another way where I can hone my teaching skills, I can hone my coaching skills, and I can connect with healthcare humans that will never have time, energy, or interest or finances, I suppose, to hire me one-on-one, for example. But I can still have this influence out in the world. And that's the kind of social media influencer I want to be, is like influencing healthcare to be more human. That's the only kind of influencing I'm interested in. But it's so fun. It's such a creative pursuit for me. And so I'm just like really loving all of that. So that's like kind of my update. No, and I'm saying this all very gushing, like it's all been beautiful joys. Like, of course, I've had lots of moments of like anxiety, of like performance anxiety. Like my very first talk where I was like on a panel with other people for like the big college, OCFP, so the big family medicine college of my province. There were like 1,000 people, and I had to cover the number of people with a sticky note because I didn't need to know exactly how many people I was going to give my little speech to. So like, you find your ways to manage all the emotions you have in your body when you're like you're putting yourself out in a way that's more visible to other humans, because pretty much all our inhuman stories are about hiding our true selves for fear we will be judged and shamed. And here I am like doing the opposite. But man, is it therapeutic. Does that help you work through and therefore unshame all those things of like, look, I'm doing it. I'm not dying. Probably there are people with wild and negative opinions of me. Did I cry the first several times I got negative comments? For sure. Did I need coaching about them? Absolutely. And I'm showing up anyway, So there's been lots of highs and lows, and but overall, like it's just felt so nourishing, like beyond what I could have even imagined before I kind of discovered that this is what I wanted to do, I want to talk a bit about the main thing that's been more of the lows, actually. So, and that's been some of the, I guess, behind the scenes of my journey through this coaching industry that I've discovered and found myself in, the whole online space and like the business side of things. So like the amazing thing about being in these different certifications and then other like coaching programs that I've bought that support different aspects of things is like very cool people in these spaces, like people who are interested in self-development, people who are interested in being in like a life coach on the internet. They're going to be interesting people, and they're from all over the world. And so like meeting a bunch of them, some of them I feel as close to as people I've known for decades, because like, when you're practicing coaching with people, you connect on a level and you share things with each other. Like I'm so happy and feel so grateful for the humans that I've interacted with and found, some of whom you've even heard on this podcast, like people I've interviewed. There are like such amazing people in the world. And I've definitely found that that's like maybe the number one thing, as well as some of like the insights and tools I've learned from certification, but almost like an equal measure, the humans I've learned that, wow, there's these kinds of humans in the world. And, people like me who are so nerdy and can geek out about like humanity and how we can all free ourselves from our limiting beliefs for hours. I'm not so good at the small talk. I would rather talk about like, what are we all doing here? And it's so cool to find people who are so like into that as well, And alongside of that, another amazing thing before I get to the disappointing stuff, like some of the best learning spaces I've ever been in. I will talk a bit about how some of them weren't perfect, but like when you're learning for you, when you sign up for a program and you sign up with your own money and you sign up just for you, not because it's like getting you towards your destination of a job, there's something so freeing about that. You get to show up exactly how you want to. You're not stressed about marks. You're not stressed about what the teacher thinks about you. You're just like, I want to learn. What am I here to learn? And like going back to school in that way has been a thrill. It's been the easiest homework, and the readings, I will just like gobble them up when like each week they were released, because it's about things that I really am so interested in. And even some weeks where I'm like, oh, I don't really agree with that, but like that was interesting, you know? So like that, like, reigniting and deepening my love of learning, I will always be grateful for as I like navigated these spaces, for sure. So those were like some of the good things I've learned. And just like, I mean, a big thing that is talked about in every coaching space I've been is like to never assume you know what's possible for yourself in your life. And, you know, it's all about big dreams, right? That's what coaching's all about, big possibilities. And sometimes it seems so cheesy, but especially in the one I did that was like the equity-centered coaching certification, like how absolutely transformative that is, especially if you have marginalized identities and have been told even more explicitly that life is not, the goodness in life is not for you. The notion of using coaching as a way to open people's eyes to what could be possible for them is like, it gives me chills. Like, that's how we can change the world, to even get more grandiose than just the healthcare system. But imagine everyone knew, like, my destiny's in my hands. Like some of those things that seem cheesy, but like if you act out of that sentiment, how will your life be different, is a very thrilling notion to imagine for your own life. And the reality of walking into that is super messy and weird. Like this whole business I've, you know, unfolded over this past year has been messy and weird, and experiments and trials and failures and figuring out what works and figuring out what people are interested in signing up for and not, you know, that's included a lot of pain and discomfort, you could say, but like so worth it. And I think I wouldn't have done any of that if I hadn't had this sort of possibility idea given to me so strongly in the certifications I did. So like all of that, super amazing. I will just spend a teeny bit of time talking about what I learned from some of the disappointing parts of these spaces, because I think just even for transparency's sake and to remind myself, if I've, you know, for when I listen back to this, you know, like another thing I encountered a lot of in these spaces, and even alluding to before, like the amount of money I have spent on coaching certifications as well as like other coaching programs, and the amount I am invited to give people money now that I'm in these spaces, and the amount of like selling that's being done, and the amount of it's a lot. And that makes sense in the sense like I'm in business spaces, and so people are talking about their business. But there's a thing that happens, which is like a lot of pretty successful businesses in the coaching space are businesses that serve coaches, or at least, I mean, that's who you see more hanging around you, because they're like, oh, you're a coach. Do you want me to support you? So you start to get a sense that it's a little pyramid shaped, if you will. And I did have a few moments, even before I signed up for my first certification, of like, is this whole thing like a pyramid scheme? Oh my gosh, what is happening? But I liked the concepts enough, and I respected some people who were in that same space enough to say, well, I'm going to be able to tell if it's a pyramid scheme, and I'm going to get out, obviously, before that happens. And so I will say, like, having come through the other side, in particular, with like the one life coach certification I did, it's not a pyramid scheme by the definition. It's not an MLM by the definition, but like those other kinds of businesses, I have witnessed how a lot of this marketing, the business side of these coaching containers and certifications have a lot of similarities with things like pyramid schemes and MLM, like really pretty like aggressive sales techniques and marketing techniques, a lot of hyper over promises, and then I would say under delivers in terms of what's actually given. Big numbers that they're asking people to pay, and then also like attaching a lot of like, if you buy big, you get big, like that kind of promising, which then on the backside is their numbers are not like the results that their clients are getting are not reflected they're only showing the big successes. They're not showing everyone else who's just like deeply in debt being in their programs, right? So I would say, like, say someone has been listening to me, or say you're one of my clients, or say you, I don't know, it's the first podcast you ever heard from me, but you're like thinking about getting into coaching. I'll have a one-on-one conversation with you anytime, especially if you look at my About Me page and I have the resume where I've listed like the different certifications I've done. I'm happy to give even more details about my specific experiences and my current views about each of those like organizations. I don't think any of them are evil, but I do think that like at least grains, if not, blocks of salt are needed for some of them, in terms of what they're promising versus just sort of thinking critically of that, if what they're promising is likely to pan out, if it's really all you'll ever need in order to be a billionaire on the internet. Because that's where there's a lot of money selling when it comes to these places, and they're like, everyone's going to be a billionaire overnight. And then so people who are, it is a bit predatory for people who are especially financially struggling, and then are being like, just remortgage your house to pay my certification for coaching. Like, that's the kind of stuff where I want to say it out loud so people know, like, that my view is that I'm not okay with those sorts of practices. I don't think that it is okay. And it's made me think really thoughtfully about moving forward, any other training I'm interested in doing, like how I would be discerning in who I get that training from. And not that it has to be low price to be valuable, but there's something about how high of a cost some of these programs were that on reflection, you got to make sure it's really then that rich of an experience to count versus a lot of hype, but not necessarily much behind the scenes, So yeah. And I think, it was really useful for me for a few reasons though. So one, like, it really got me over my like money drama, because I spent so much money that I had to really think through money drama. And I had the whole episode I did about like money shame and like understanding what money is and isn't, and how I want to use it as a resource in my life for myself and for others, and like, for the world. Receiving money and spending money, it has helped me get really clear about all of that. And I'm grateful for that for sure. I also noticed something in myself that has been useful to untangle, which is like how I can put people on pedestals. I think, like I've always liked behind the scenes, I've always liked celebrity culture. Like, I'm not so much a Kardashian gal myself, but like certain kinds of celebrities, like on shows I would have like a rich fantasy daydream of like being their friends or whatever, And I think a little bit about these coaching spaces can sometimes prey on that, where they really lean into what you call a parasocial relationship. And it's not unique to coaching. Like, even there's this one YouTuber that I've been following forever that now has had a big scandal come out recently. And you see how she was preying on what they call a parasocial relationship. So you don't actually have a relationship with them because they're over there. So there's like the celebrity type person. There's the leader person who's creating content or even writes the books you like. And so you're a fan of them, right? Like that. And so, but especially some of those people really foster like, I love you all. You're all my best friends. I'm closer to you than people in my personal life or something. Like, they're saying a lot of stuff like that. And so then all the fans are like, wow, I feel like I really know her or him, right? And that there's ways you can be thoughtful about that. And there's ways you can be exploitative and kind of predatory when you're the person who's like on top and like offering it to the fans, if you will. And it's something I've thought a lot about because I think I'm prone to like receiving a good parasocial relationship. I'm like, I love this person. I love this person. I can't imagine ever meeting them out. I'd cry, whatever. And so I've had some opportunities to be in spaces with people that I had a strong parasocial relationship because I love their books or I love their podcasts or I love their coaching or like whatever, including like authors, like the one that I had on the podcast, like incredible human, Hillary McBride will say that one was just a lovely exchange. No, this is not an example of where my ideas were shattered about her or something. Like, that's like, you realize, oh, you're just meeting a real person and all these ideas you have, they kind of get in the way of you just meeting the real person though, And so that was, such an incredible opportunity to meet her and connect with her and realize, wow, we are two people who have amazing ideas and conversations, and we are peers in some ways. Like, probably not in the world's eyes, but really, like, each of us is a human. We can all be peers with each other and be connecting with each other. That was a great lesson I learned from her, versus like other people in especially the coaching spaces who are kind of more coaching celebrities in this one tiny little corner of the internet. I think I like had up on such a pedestal that then when I was disappointed by something they did, it was really useful. It was really useful for a couple of reasons. First, to help me like disentangle whatever parts of me I thought I needed to, like the reasons I couldn't view them as an equal. I wanted them to be higher up than me, you know? That was really helpful to sort of heal those parts of myself and know like we really are all human beings walking around, and idolizing and pedestaling someone in that way is actually pretty objectifying and harming for them when I was doing it. And it was certainly harmful for me and how it put me down, and it was me putting myself down, you know? And I'm sharing that in case that's of interest to people. And I'm also sharing it because I am hopeful that as I continue to be in this space, and I've had more experiences over this past year than ever, of course, like, because I've never been putting myself in the public sphere like I have this past year. So I've had more experience of people being like, oh my gosh, I feel like I know you because I listened to your podcast, or someone saying, oh my gosh, I feel like I know you. I'm like following you on social media, and there's parts of me that almost got this like, oh, now I get to be on a pedestal, and the thrill of that. And I was like, I'm going to be very careful of that. So careful. I'm going to name it on the podcast and say, Joan, you are a human being like these other human beings. You are here to be peers with them and hold space with them and co-create with them, not to be like worshipped by them. It's really interesting because we do this all the time in culture. And I know I've seen myself doing it with others. And I really, really, really don't want this space to be about that at all. Like, I am just a human being, like everyone who's listening. And you are all human beings who have so much to teach me as well. I hold this space for you by offering my thoughts to you. And when you're my client, like I hold a space for you so you can learn and grow, but not because I'm better than you or know more than you or anything. It's because I've had specific training, and I feel like I have a specific calling, if you will, in a spiritual way for me. But like, this is my passion, is to hold space for you. I get benefit from holding the space, and you get benefit hopefully by me holding space for you. And we have this exchange, including if you're my client, you pay me money too. And then that helps me hold space for you. Right. Like, but I want it to be non-hierarchical. I want it to be this mutually beneficial thing between you and I, each of you and I that are listening to this, you know. I wanted to just say that because I've seen how twisted it can get based on some of the spaces I'm either been in or have witnessed, that I've seen associated with some of the things I've gotten. So I just wanted to say that piece. So my lesson, what's the lesson I learned about that? I just learned celebrity culture is tricky, and pedestaling people is harmful for everyone. And so my goal, and even how if you ever hear me and you're like, ooh, it seems like she's putting herself on this pedestal or talking down to us, or, ooh, I didn't like how that felt. Anyway, please always tell me. I am always open to that. I would always want to know. I don't think it's bad to feel intimate or connected to someone because you're listening to their stuff or connecting with their stuff. That's like what all art is, right? And this is, I guess, a kind of art or teaching or whatever. Like, it's beautiful to feel connected with each other, but I would hope it's always in a way where it's like mutual and mutual in power, right? It's not one having all the power and the other one having none of the power, and like a fan situation in that way. See what I mean? I hope you hear what I mean. So I'd say that's like a big thing. The last thing I think that I always want to be very cautious of, and I'm saying these for myself, but also like if you ever hear me teach something and you're like, ooh, that didn't land well for me, you can always reach out to me. I have seen where some of these like coaching tools, including ones I've taught, they in of themselves, anything I teach here, I've gotten deep benefit from, period. Otherwise I would not be teaching it to you. And you can use some of these tools in a way that really kind of are like gaslighting against yourself. Like notions of, okay, what is the story you're telling yourself? And then what's like a new, more healing human story you want to tell yourself, right? In the language of that, people can feel blamed, or they can start to insert. I've seen certain coaching spaces where you like get blamed for having the wrong story, or it's like, why do you keep telling yourself that story? What's wrong with you? As if it's not like totally human to have these more limiting or self-defeating or shame stories that we default of, like having to feel less than perfect or not enough. Like, we didn't do those to ourselves. Society and our like past experiences did them to us. So spaces where I see it's like the most unhelpful kind of teaching of it, where you're like, just find the right story to tell yourself, find the right thought to think, and then you will get often millions of dollars. It's like all about money and the really predatory parts of the space. So it's like, if you're not making millions of dollars, that's on you for thinking the wrong thoughts. That's like literally something I've heard. Anyway, that's not great. And anything that I'm teaching, I want to never come close to that. Okay? That's the main thing I want to say about that. The notion of all of this, that's like even parts of self-help work or self-improvement work. Barf. There's nothing you need to improve. You're already perfectly, incredibly human and wonderful. Like, I try not to even use that language. And you see how, I mean, so many of us that really get into self-help, self-improvement spaces, you notice most of us are socialized female, and like a lot of us that are into this stuff, it's because we've been told our whole lives we're not enough. And so we finally think we can find a way to fix ourselves. I do not want to participate in that kind of the culture. No, this is not about improving. This is not about fixing, because you aren't broken. It's the opposite for me. It's like, how can I use my words and use my skills to show you how unbroken you are, show you how being your authentic human self is the most wonderful thing you can be. And all the inhuman stories that you've been given from the outside that limit your ability to see that, and limit your ability to see in other people too. I feel like it's self-fulfilling. It's self-remembering. It's homecoming. Like, you know, the name of that course, it's truly like all the goodness is already inside of you, and you've got all these blockages that are stopping you from seeing it. Like, that's what I feel like. That's the way I want to be viewing this. It's not about getting better. You are already the best. So, needed to name that, because that's another really toxic part of the culture that I have seen as I've been like navigating all of these spaces. And yeah, I think that's like, those were the main things I wanted to say that were a bit more like disappointing that I've learned from my journey, but that were so helpful for me to learn, actually, you know, because I think really you get into this whole new world and you think it's all going to be rainbows and butterflies because you just want it to be, because it's like this new exciting thing. And I've been glad for the ways, you know, scales have fallen from my eyes, and I've seen some of the less great parts of it. And it includes like, so if you look at, say, the certifications I've done, just because they're listed on my resume doesn't mean I give them my like full endorsement. And like I said at the beginning, if you ever are curious to hear more, or like if you're looking at one of those programs and you're curious about it and you see this one side and you'd like a like fuller picture, just from my one experience, but I can, you know, point you some other places where there are reviews and stuff, you could get maybe a more rounded out view and then make an informed choice for yourself, of course, right? So that's why I wanted to share all of that with you. And it's a fascinating world. Even just the whole world of online business is fascinating. If anyone's ever interested in talking more about that and like marketing and all these things, like it would be great actually if all of us in healthcare got more business training. Actually, I think that would be useful. But the right kind of business training that is focused on human beings, it's possible. Money doesn't equal dehumanization, but lots of ways that money and business is taught about is dehumanizing. So I'll just leave that there. And that's something, I am not on a pedestal. I do not have all the answers, but I do have a much deeper sense of what is aligned with my values or not, as I continue to think through offering new ideas and new ways of holding space for anyone out there who's listening who wants like a deeper level of support than the podcasts. The podcasts I love to do. And, you know, I'm often talking about different things like workshops or coaching or whatever. And so I'm thinking through how I offer those, which include an exchange of money with me, right? How do I do that in a way that feels egalitarian, equitable with each of you? So if you ever feel like that wasn't how it went down when you had a conversation with me or had a, client experience with me, please tell me that too. I really want to know that stuff. So those are the main things. I guess the last thing is just like, I do what's coming next, right? So this past year, I've done lots of experiments in different ways to offer restorative medical education and coaching to people. I really love workshops. I'm planning to still do those. I'm hoping to do more like co-workshops with people that I think are really exciting or interesting, who are also reimagining aspects of healthcare. I think that would be very fun to run workshops with some of them. So I'm going to reach out to some of them and see if they'd be wanting to come on board. I want to keep doing one-on-one coaching for sure. I love it very much. I know I'm going to continue to limit the number of spots I offer at a time because I don't ever want to stretch beyond my capacity and feel burnt out about it. No. And so it's going to be a select amount that I'm able to offer, part-time, as I have other jobs that I do and only so much time in the calendar. And so another way though, I really want to do again that I did last year, but I'm doing it in like a bigger, richer way this coming fall, is a group program. So I'm going to say what it's called now. I'm recording this June 26th. I think my goal is to have some little opening website page, including a way to sign up by the time this podcast comes out in a few weeks. But the name I have changed by then because it's already changed a few times, but I still want to say something. So if you look at the page and it's a different name, that's the process I go through. Okay. I create as I go, but the name of the group I have right now is called Interconnected, subtitle, a restorative group coaching experience with healthcare humans, something like that. It might be something different, but I really like the term interconnected because that's the one thing I've noticed. I love my one-on-one work and getting deeply connected with each individual person, but so many of the conversations have similar elements. And I want to be like, you should meet this other, everyone feels so alone and like they're the only one. And we are so not. It's like all the same stuff that we have. We have all the same baggage because we went through the same shameful, oppressive, dehumanizing medical system and training. So we're all like, no, I'm an imposter. No, I'm an imposter. But literally none of us are. And it's the system that's made us all feel like imposters, right? So that's why I really want to do this group thing. Plus it allows me to serve more healthcare humans in one container. So that feels really good to me to expand the impact, It's going to have, I think, weekly calls. I think it's going to have some amount of course modules too. And the theme is going to be about connection with yourself as a human being in a human body. And what happens when you do get reconnected with that and how you then have human body paced, human body and brain friendly work environments, including your schedule, how you set up your work environment, kind of all of those questions, and have everyone share with each other what they're doing. Also just practicing kind of tools of connection with each other, practicing some of that deep listening and space holding that I've been saying I've been really enjoying doing with my patients, and really practicing that with each other. So it being a bit of a skill building group as well, and then talking through, of course, what's making healthcare feel less than human to us, our hardest patient situations unfolding, so we can hold space for each other, colleague concerns. That's such a common theme, the sort of lateral violence we can get from our colleagues when we're all just trying to do our best. And I want this container to be well beyond just a support group, but a place where we can practice connection to ourselves and each other, so that when we go out in the world, we feel more connected to our patients, more connected to our communities and our healthcare system in a way that's generative and not draining. So that's probably, hopefully, if it all goes according to plan, there'll be a link in this one or maybe next week's, depending on how it all unfolds, to sign up for that for the fall. So if that sounds of interest to you, even if you just have more questions and you look at the paid invitation page and you're confused, just reach out to me. But that's another thing that I'm really excited to be opening up this fall. And I want to do it in a really wonderful, human connected way. And then the other thing that I have no current official plan to announce, but I just want to say it out loud so that it helps it come true. I'm manifesting, if you will, which is a common thing people talk about in coaching communities. I want to manifest. I want to host an in-person retreat, not at my house, but like, I really want an in-person retreat. I would love to meet some of you in person, and not in a weird celebrity culture way, but in a way where like, I just want to meet some people who are interested in this conversation of like what it is to be a human in healthcare, and then to hold space for you guys, and probably have like guest facilitators too, and like set up probably a weekend retreat where we just like dive deep and really connect in person. That is my dream, and I want it to happen next year, but it will happen when it unfolds to happen. But like, oh my gosh, I would love that. So those are like my future dreams for this. And like, keep doing the podcast, of course, and keep doing all of the social media stuff, because like those are sort of the outreach branches, and a way that you will always hopefully get nuggets of like support and humanization, even if you never want to offer money for exchange for of something that I offer. You know what I mean? Like, you still can hopefully get a lot of support this way. And so those I want to continue as well. And I've just learned so much. And so I'll just say at the end of this, just deep, deep gratitude for listening. If this is the first one you've ever listened to, thank you for listening to this one. But I know I look at the numbers and they're really consistent for everyone. There's this group of you who are listening. I guess it could be different people, but I know, well, from speaking for some of you, you're listening consistently. And I want to say this in a way that's not like a weird parasocial thing. Just thank you for listening. Like, that's it. You don't owe me anything. This isn't like a fan, whatever. But like, thank you for listening. I am so grateful that anyone takes time to listen. I know the intimacy I feel with people who are in my ears, and I really don't take it for granted that you are offering your earbuds in your ears to listen to me. And I don't want to let you down about that. I want to keep offering you what is saving me in hopes it could help save you and others. And I just have deep gratitude. So thank you so much. So with that, I think that's the end of this one. And I believe that will be the end of this season of the show. I am taking the month of August off. And so unless I am inspired in some way and then have stuff scheduled, this is probably the last podcast until the fall. So you may have a little hiatus or not. I like to surprise myself too. But if not, I hope you do have deep moments of like rest and restoration over the summer, or whenever you listen to this. I know you could listen to some time in the future. I hope you're getting your rest in whatever season it is for you, or you're listening from Australia. Just thought of that. Sorry, a little tangential. This is my third podcast in a day. Also, speaking of an invitation, if you do want to hear more podcasts from me while you're waiting for the other human in the room to pick up, one option you have is Homecoming, which is the podcast-based course that I now have on offer for you as an invitation. If you want to sign up for that course and listen to podcasts that are my thoughts, they're my personal stories of what was hard for me to rest and what makes rest so challenging, personal stories of how I've processed, emotions in the past, and some of the same teaching tools I've offered on here, but in a self-paced course that invites you to really practice rest yourself. And so if you're interested in that, or anything else that I have to offer you, other courses, you could always go to joanchanmd.com. Specifically for my courses, it's joanchanmd.com/courses. And no matter what, I hope to see you. I hope to connect with you in some way in the fall. And so much gratitude to all of you out there being a human in healthcare. You know what I mean? It is quite a time to do that work, isn't it? And you are doing it. And that's amazing. All right. Take care.